Peruvian health workers protested to demand improvements to their pay and conditions this Thursday. Spanish health authorities have reported the highest number of new COVID-19 cases since the country's lockdown ended. Palestinian authorities have rejected a deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates to normalize relations. From the headquarters of Teleso English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Health workers protested in Peru on Thursday to demand improvements to their pay and conditions in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Health workers' unions organised a rally in front of the Ministry of Health while calling on Peruvian authorities to address their demands. Unions are demanding that all healthcare personnel, not only those in critical areas, receive a support package of $205 per month. Meanwhile, Peruvian authorities have reported over 489,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 21,000 deaths since the outbreak of the epidemic. Cuban health authorities presented an update on the COVID-19 figures this Thursday.
With the analysis of these 4,591 samples, 46 people tested positive for COVID-19. 46 people in which SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 were detected. And with this behavior of testing and results, 314,499 tests have been carried out, and 3,174 people have been diagnosed with COVID-19.
The National Director of Epidemiology at the Cuban Ministry of Public Health made reference to the number of people who have recovered from COVID-19.
Yesterday there were 21 discharges, all from Havana. It is a good number, but unfortunately when we compare it with the number of cases diagnosed yesterday, it is still a negative figure. And with these 21 discharges yesterday, 2,525 patients have recovered. This represents 80% of all the cases diagnosed in our country.
And lastly, Dr. Duran confirmed the death of one person from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours.
Unfortunately, one patient has died yesterday from the disease. Today, Cuba reports 89 deaths. The country's mortality rate is 2.8%.
On Thursday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the suspension of private charter flights between the United States and Cuba starting in October. According to a statement, the decision will affect all charter flights under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Department of Transportation and other travel deemed in the interest of the United States. Meanwhile, family visits to Cuba have been heavily impacted under the Trump administration, which banned commercial flights to all Cuban airports except Havana late last year, before imposing the same restrictions on charter flights from the US in January. The latest measure aimed at tightening the sanctions imposed by the United States against the Cuban people. This Thursday is the 94th anniversary of Fidel Castro's birth. To mark the date, the leader of the Cuban Revolution will be remembered in an international video conference from Havana, which will see the participation of distinguished diplomats and politicians. We take a look at the legacy of this towering figure who built a socialist revolution on the doorstep of the United States.
As a young man, Fidel planned to overthrow Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. He led a guerrilla war in the cities and in the Sierra Maestra mountain range. The resistance won the war, and Castro began building a revolution that set an example for the world. He focused on giving the Cuban people, previously deprived of many basic human rights, the opportunity of owning the land they worked on, the ability to read and write, in the fastest literacy campaign ever seen. Also the possibility of a fairer distribution of the country's wealth, which until then had been in the hands of very few families and American companies. Since day one, the United States tried to topple him in every possible way. Several U.S. administrations attempted to unsuccessfully remove him by assassination, through an economic blockade and warfare, including the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, supported by President John Kennedy's government. The mercenary invasion is remembered worldwide as the first defeat of U.S. imperialism in Latin America. Fidel dedicated his life to building a different world for the Cuban people and those ways. The island nation has one of the lowest infant mortality rates in the world, a free and solid educational system, and now is leading the battle against COVID-19 due to its highly educated health personnel and Cuban development in the biopharmaceutical industry. A visionary like very few men in the world, Fidel also promoted international solidarity that saw Cuban doctors sent to save hundreds of thousands of lives across the world, as seen during the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. These same efforts have returned sight to millions of patients from over 30 countries through innovative eye surgery. Even now, Cuban doctors are requested all over the world and have been sent to over 30 countries to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, implementing the health protocols that have already proven effective in Cuba, where 80% of patients have recovered from the virus. He would have turned 94 this August 13th, and although he remains a highly controversial figure to some, Fidel Castro, the icon of the Cold War, the leader of the bearded revolutionary, friend of Hugo Chavez, Diego Maradona, or Gabriel Garcia Marquez, was a man who radically transformed the small Caribbean nation of Cuba and set an example of emancipation and anti-imperialism against all odds. In Cuba, he is remembered as an irreplaceable leader, and in the world, is seen as a legend, the man who defeated the most powerful country in the world and lived long enough to see his revolution succeed.
I will be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Spanish health authorities reported over 2,900 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, representing the highest number since the country's lockdown ended, while noting that the Madrid region is the hardest hit area.
In Spain, the number of reported cases continues to rise, both by date of diagnosis and by date of onset of symptoms. But it's true that it's a gentle rise that allows the implementation of control measures in a much more serious and much more controlled way. Madrid is one of those with the more dangerous situation. I think they are cause for attention. We have to act, and they are acting a lot and very well, but the entire population and all the health systems and all of us who work in the health system have to maintain tension.
The governor of the U.S. state of Nevada announced on Thursday that the state had officially reached 1,000 COVID-19 deaths.
Today, it is with great sadness that we must recognize that Nevada has reached the 1,000 death toll for COVID-19. The grief felt by Nevadans for these individuals, these families, these friends, is enormous. The First Lady and I send our condolences to all of the loved ones of the more than 1,000 Nevadans who have lost their life to a disease. And we ask your help to not have any more people die as a result of COVID-19, to do what we can to mitigate this terrible disease.
Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin has stated that progress is being made in Brexit trade talks after meeting with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson for the first time since taking office in June. As the talks are ongoing to try and reach a deal between London and Brussels, neighbouring Ireland, which is a member of the European Union, has expressed concern regarding the impact on border issues with Northern Ireland. The Brexit talks are set to continue until October, but fears are growing that a deal will not be reached before the deadline on December 31st.
That there is a landing zone. Say that I think where there's a will, there's a way. It seems to me that there is a landing zone, if that will is there on both sides, and I think it is, on the European Union side and on the British side, to find that landing zone. We both agreed on the absolute necessity for a free trade agreement that would be tariff-free, quota-free, that's the best possible outcome for the European Union, for the United Kingdom.
Authorities in the United Kingdom have added France and the Netherlands to the list of countries from where travellers must undergo a mandatory quarantine period on arrival in the UK, following a recent surge in COVID-19 cases in the two countries.
Well, today, this evening, we're announcing that there will now be quarantine brought in for a number of other locations, now including France, Holland and some others. And that's because we've absolutely worked so hard to make sure that we're keeping our numbers down here, and we can't afford to re-import those cases from elsewhere. People who are in France or indeed Holland or one or two other places that we're announcing this evening who are added to the quarantine list, we're saying to people you can stay and finish your holiday, but you have to be aware you will have to quarantine after that, and that is mandatory, I'm afraid, because we do need to protect the lower rates we've managed to establish in this country.
The Prime Minister of Mauritius noted on Thursday that an official investigation has been launched into the devastating oil spill caused by a Japanese cargo ship that ran aground on July 25th.
There is still some oil left in the bilge and other parts of the boat, which they are trying to pump and remove, but let's say the great amount, the majority of the oil has been taken out of the boat. There is an investigation which has already started. We have the officers of the police force, of the Ministry of the Fishery also, who made a descent of the boat to assemble all that can be brought as evidence. There are also interrogations. The crew is made up of about 20 people, including the captain and officers. So at this level, the investigations will be able to determine the causes of this accident, the reasons why the boat came so close to our shores and ran aground, and of course a general mobilization at all levels to continue cleaning up and making sure that the oil can be removed from the sea. The owners of the boat have apologized. There has been and still is damage that has been caused, be it to the environment, to professionals, to fishermen, to boaters and others, and to this part of our country. So again, we need the help of certain experts to guide us and to make any claims. Some of the complaints will already be made and others to follow.
Russian authorities have denounced foreign interference in the internal affairs of Belarus following violent protests orchestrated by Western powers.
We see clear efforts of foreign interference with affairs of the sovereign state in order to split the society and to destabilize the situation. We have seen the use of such methods in other countries. Any attempts to find some Russian footprint in the organization of unrest in the country are groundless. These trails lead to other directions. We have given relevant facts to the Belarusians, and these facts are in public access. I want to stress that Russia remains a solid ally and friend of Belarus and the Belarusian people.
The trade war between the United States and China has now extended to social media and the internet, which has become the latest battlefield between the two world powers.
Under the alleged interest of protecting American citizens' privacy, Trump's administration is conducting a campaign against the widely used TikTok and WeChat apps, bringing the US-China hostilities to a new level, the world of social networks applications.
I don't understand this ban. They are very popular, very convenient. We basically use them every day.
Trump's ban on WeChat is likely to cause problems for users and businesses dealing with China from the United States. In China, these platforms are used by 72% of the 1.4 billion Chinese population. Here, the WeChat platform is more than a social media app. It is used to buy products, stock investment, travel, and even check the health status of people in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
TikTok is very popular among young people, and WeChat is used every day to read books, listen to music, go shopping, watch movies, then to talk to friends now that many are away or working in other places.
China has requested to not politicize issues which are economic. Beijing thinks that the sanctions against these platforms only seek to maintain the monopoly of high technology by the United States, which last year used similar excuses to expel the giant international 5G network Huawei from the United States, pressing its international allies to follow the same path.
Under the excuse of defending national security, the United States frequently abuses its power and unjustly represses non-US companies, which is a clear act of bullying, and China opposed this position firmly.
The United States is used to impose their way of life that goes from fashion to entertainment, always on the rest of the world. Now, Washington sees the advancement of these Chinese platforms as a threat to its national security, the same country that demands the world to be open to Google and Facebook in the name of globalization. This country now closes the doors to TikTok and WeChat.
Iranzi Peraza, Telesur, Beijing, China.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Israel and the United Arab Emirates announced they had reached an agreement on Thursday to normalise relations. The deal was brokered by the United States, with President Donald Trump taking the credit for facilitating what he called a historical peace agreement, which would see the United Arab Emirates become the third Arab state to have full diplomatic ties with Israel after Egypt and Jordan. A joint statement by the UAE, Israel and the US said the breakthrough would advance peace in the Middle East region. As part of the agreement, Israel agreed to suspend the annexation of parts of the occupied West Bank, at least for now. And the Palestinian National Authority has rejected the agreement, highlighting the move undermines the Arab Peace Initiative and decisions over the Palestinian cause.
The Palestinian leadership announces its strong rejection and condemnation of the surprise American-Israeli Emirati tripartite declaration on a full normalization of relations between the occupying Israeli states and the United Arab Emirates, in exchange of an alleged temporary suspension of the plan to annex Palestinian lands and extend Israel's sovereignty over them. The Palestinian leadership sees this step as torpedoing the Arab Peace Initiative, the decisions of the Arab and Islamic summits, and international law, as well as an aggression against the Palestinian people and a neglect of the Palestinian rights and sanctities, first and foremost Jerusalem and the independent Palestinian state according to the borders of June 4, 1967.
And residents in the Gaza Strip, together with representatives of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas, have also denounced the agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, noting it undermines the legitimate struggle of the Palestinian people to end the Israeli occupation.
This agreement does not serve the Palestinian cause at all. It serves the Zionist ideas. This agreement encourages the occupation to continue in denying the rights of all Palestinian people. Rather, it is the continuation of crimes and aggression against all Palestinian people. What was required was always to support the legitimate Palestinian struggle against the occupation, not to establish relations with it. As Palestinians, we cannot confront the annexation plan with compromise